Novigrad's eternal fire was never meant to burn. A cipher, Pact not a rewritten weapon, conjunctions rift. Ash fell on Kaer Morhen's shattered spires as mages chanted in reverse, their breath frosting into failed sigils. The Wild Hunt rode not as conquerors but as witnesses spectral, silent through vineyards that would forget their names. What the fire became was a wound kept open. Desperation in the forged in reverse cultists knew this. Conjunctions rift lit the failed lamp's sigils, and the war walked in. The fire was a shield. Novigrad's spires promised trade, the lodge promised power, the schools promised glory, but the conjunction loomed. Sorceresses wove sigils to bend the stars, their chants fueling flames meant to seal the rift. The Pact, burn forever, hold the spheres at bay. Instead, the fire fed on magic, on blood, on hope. The conjunction came. The flames did not stop it, they mirrored its hunger. What drowns in its light becomes its voice. The cult did not ignite the war, they kept it warm. And when the spheres aligned, the eternal fire did not die. It remembered, still burns, still waits, still whispers the war's return. Beneath Novigrad's spires, mages wove a pact to sever the conjunction's threads. They called it the trial of the grassesser, ritual to snuff the celestial fire before spheres collided. But the grasses they burned were not sacred. A scholar's greed had swapped holy herbs for forbidden roots. The flames did not purify, they devoured. The ritual's smoke coiled into a serpent, swallowing stars. Novigrad's scholars watched as their sanctuary melted into shadow. The fire they sought to master leapt from pyre to throat, turning breath to ash. Survivors fled, but the fire followed. It clung to their bones, their blood, their names. Centuries later, the cultists still chant the mage's final incantation. Their tongues blacken, their eyes glow. They do not fear the conjunction, they crave it, for the fire they unleashed is no longer a tool. It is a god hungry for the chaos it birthed. What did the mages sacrifice to cheat fate? Not just their lives but the balance of all things. The trial of the grasses was never about prevention. It was a plea, a gamble, a wound, and wounds fester. The eternal fire's glow now marks every war, every betrayal. It does not warn of the conjunction's return. It wields the return, a relic of failure, a weapon of the desperate. The mage's last act was not heroism. It was the first strike in an age of ash. The fire still burns, still waits, still wants asterisk, and in its heart the trial of the grasses whispers, again, Novigrad's spires clawed the heavens, their light outshining stars. The lodge of sorceresses wove spells that bent seasons to their will. Vesemir walked the docks, his blade a silent vow against chaos. Power pooled in the streets like river gold open, unafraid. The eternal fire cult began not as heresy but as hope. They built their forge to chain the conjunction's coming, to smelt fate itself. Ash fell from their rituals, black and sweet, as if the sky wept honey. For a time it worked. The fire they kindled was meant to shield the city, a beacon against unknown tides, but flames hunger. What they could not consume, they corrupted. The same forge that stalled doom became its engine. Sorceresses turned to zealots, their chants wore drums. Vesemir saw the shift, too late. He could not slay the fire thade, made only stand watch as it devoured its makers. The lodge, once architects of wonder, became prisoners of their own hubris. Novigrad's pride was not its magic nor its monsters, but the belief that light could be tamed. The fire remembers, it burns not to protect but to repay. And in its heart the trial of the grasses whispers, again, The air at Sodden Hill reeked of burnt sage and charred bone. 12 towers of light had stood there, each a sorceress bound to the sky's last thread. Now only 2 remained, tryst tears, and Philippa's silence cradling fragments of a shattered spellbook. The northern wars did not begin with a scream but a sigh, the wind carrying the dead sorceresses' names into the void. Novigrad's eternal fire cult, born of that void, carved its first pyres not to banish war but to delay it. They believed the conjunction storm could be bargained with, that flames could forge a bridge between eras. Instead, the fire devoured its makers. The trial of the grasses had warned them. Centuries earlier, the same ritual had failed to stanch the little death, a lesser cataclysm, yet enough to scar the land. The cult ignored the lesson. They lit their altars in the ruins of Brokilon's oldest oaks, where the roots still thrum with forgotten hymns. Smoke curled into the shape of a cat silhouette, the last sigil of Styga's school before its libraries drowned in blood. The fire did not burn blue as it once had in the sorceress's hands. It burned black, a hunger given form. By the time the Northern Wars reached their fever pitch, the cult's followers wore ash as a crown. They fed the flames with treaties, with children's lullabies, with the last words of kings. The fire did not stop the where it became the war. And when the smoke cleared, Brokilon's forests had retreated a league further, their borders bleeding into myth. The trial of the grasses whispers again, but now it asks not why but how many ? How many more fires must rise before the balance tips? How many more names must the wind carry? The eternal fire remembers every answer. It waits, patient as a witcher's steel, for the next hand to feed it. But the ruin you walk through now is later than that. The wound opened wider still. The Northern Wars did not shy from the flames they fed them. What began as a shield against chaos became a forge for conquest. The fire that once sought to mend the world now roared to burn it anew. Ashes of kingdoms rose where the eternal flame had promised light, and in the smoke the cult's true hunger was revealed, not to end war but to master it. The flame they kindled to sever fate refused to die. The spell collapsed, leaving fire that could not be quenched. What followed was no salvation, only a slow unraveling. Each ritual reenacted the failure. Each chant begged to bind what could not be bound. The djinn, once sealed by blood and bone, writhed free-mocking, hungry, feeding on the cult's grief. Some say the wild hunt rides faster where the fire burns, drawn to chaos like moths to a pyre. The northern kings saw power. They weaponized the cult's despair. What began as a pact to still the conjunction storms became a forge for war. The Spellbook, once a relic of hope, now scribbled with curses to fuel siege and blade. And in the end, the fire that could not be extinguished burned the hands that fed it. The cult's hymns turned to wails. The flame, eternal and unyielding, became both witness and weapon. The wild hunt, ever hungry, found new souls in the smoke. The conjunction's shadow deepens, the fire still burns. And somewhere in the echoes of a spell, the embers of Novigrad's underbelly whisper of a spell that could not be uncast. Cultists huddle in the dark, their chants a mockery of the pact that once promised salvation. The eternal fire, born of desperation, was meant to sever the threads of war before the conjunction wove its chaos. Instead, it became a forge for new gods, its flames drinking souls to fuel an endless hunger. Ages ago, scholars and warlocks bound their hopes to a single question: can fire outrun fate? They carved sigils into the city's bones, poured elixirs of blood and starlight into the earth. The fire roared to life, but not as a shield, not as a shield. It was a beacon, a siren, a wound that bled across realms. Now the rituals twist what little truth remains. The conjunction's shadow is no longer something to defy. It is something to feed. The fire's hunger outlasts the names of those who kindled it. What is a pact when the price is paid in eternity? The answer burns in Novigrad's veins, a cycle of ash and longing. The fire still calls, the fire still burns. And somewhere in the echoes of a spell, the question lingers: was this ever a solution or only a slower way to drown? Vesemir, Kaer Morhen's last memory keeper, forged pacts in blood to quench a war no man could see. Yennefer of Vengerberg, her womb a cursed crucible, wove spells that fed the fire she could not extinguish. Ciri, heir to a bloodline the stars forgot, walks a path where every step drowns the past. The eternal flame was never meant to consummate, was a shield, a desperate sigil against the conjunction's storm, but ash is a poor barrier against fate. What begins as a covenant to still the heavens becomes a pyre for kingdoms. The Lodge of Sorceresses whispers of a girl who could not bear life, yet birthed a blaze that outlives empires. Hen Iker blood, thin as a scar, binds a child to hunters who chase what they cannot kill. Did the fire's makers know their magic was a chain, not a barrier, or did they burn the world to delay the end by a single, screaming breath? The names endure, the war comes, the fire eternal. Ash clings to the medallions, rust bleeds through the witcher sigils. Beneath Novigrad's gutters, the djinn's brass surface still sweats with trapped breath. A wish is a debt. The words are carved deeper than the metal, deeper than the hands that etched them, perhaps. The lodge's shattered sigils lie nearby, their once smooth edges jagged with failed magic. A sorceress seal cracked like a promise. What did they bargain for? What did the fire cost? The eternal flame's first pyres were built with sorceress iron. The cult's founders, desperate scribes of the conjunction's omen, fused Witcher blood to steel. They sought to bind the heavens' fracture. Instead, the Jinn's curse seeped into the forge. Every wish whispered at the flame became a chain. The Lodge's last missives, scrawled in ash on crumbling ledgers, speak of a convergence of errors. Their spells to slow the stars only hastened the fall. The fire's heart now is a monument to misdirection. Merchants sell trinkets forged from the cult's blackened tools. A child's pendant, a soldier's dagger, each carries a whisper of the Pact. The Jinn's debt is not paid, it compounds. The Lodge's sigils, when pressed to a wound, still bleed silver, not protection, remorse. Did the founders know? Did they light the flame with eyes open to its hunger? The streets above choke on their answer. Novigrad's spires, built on sorceress bones and Witcher regrets, burn brighter each century. The fire was never meant to end war. It was a loan, a single screaming breath borrowed from the abyss, and every loan eventually demands its due. The northern wars carved their hunger into the city's bones. A mage prince promised Novigrad a shield, a fire that would outlast empires, a pact to smother conflict before it began. They did not ask how the wild hunt feeds. The first Witcher contract was not a victory, it was a spark dropped into a dry well. Centuries later, the flames still lick the sky, but they burn what they were sworn to protect. The spell required a price paid in arrears. Each generation added its fears to the pyre, convinced the next offering would sate the inferno. Instead, the fire learned. It devoured prayers, twisted enchantments into weapons. What was meant to quell war became its engine. The wild hunt, ever hungry, found a gateway in that synthetic blaze. Their shadows now dance in the cult's rituals, mistaken for guardians. No magic exists without a counterforce. The eternal fire's true legacy is not in the wars it failed to prevent, but in the wars it made inevitable. A city's desperation, crystallized into spellwork, cannot end in salvation. It ends in kindling. The cultists do not know they are the match. They do not know the fire was never meant to die. And when the wild hunt rides through Novigrad's smoldering streets, they will mistake the end for the beginning. The first Witcher who signed that contract is long ash. The fire remains. What fire did Novigrad's founders bind, and why did it devour them? They sought to smother war with flame, a pact to bend the conjunction's chaos. Instead, the spell ignited a hunger. Ash of the dead birthed the wild hunt's new crusade. Hen Iker blood now stains